Um, if you've been to Wilmer Park lately and you've been down to this part of the bulkhead down here, can you guys see my cursor when I do that?
Yes. Yep.
This is an area that's really been gnawing at me for a couple of years now. Long story short, we have periodical tidal flooding that overrides this bulkhead. It leads to all kinds of issues like land subsidence, washing out of backfill, has negative impacts on the little trail that we have along the bulkhead. So I just want to take tonight to kind of introduce the problem. I'm going to give you a brief history of how this part of Wilmer Park was created, because I think that's one of the reasons that got us to where we are today. I'm going to show you some of the problems that we're having there. I'm going to give what I see as 6 potential options for what we can do. And I'm going to try to put this in the context of the broader picture of this entire stretch of waterfront from Wilmer Park to Radcliffe Creek. So is everybody got your seatbelt strapped on?
Ready to roll.
All right, ready to roll. Let's talk about the history of the creation of this part of Wilmer Park. So this dates back to the early to mid 1980s. You can see these. Bill was able to give you these old photographs. So we're all pretty familiar with this. Really, I'm going to be focusing on kind of this area right here. Okay? So why am I focusing on this? If you've been down there in the last, I go down here all the time. I walk my dog here basically daily with Sultana. When we're not in COVID, I'm down at this waterfront all the time. So here's a picture that I took earlier this year. And this is something that happens probably in the spring. It happens all the time. But I'd say on average, we probably get 1 to 3 of these types of tides a month. And you can see what's happening is that the tide has overrun the bulkhead and flooded this whole east end of the park. And these are those benches looking out at the river. All right. So what's been happening since the mid 80s is that the fill has subsided. At the same time, if you believe the scientists, we're getting more and more of these sort of high spring tides. Images of, again, these aren't hurricanes or tropical systems. These are just, hey, it's a full or a new moon, which makes higher tides. There's been a sustained southerly wind that's really powerful for a day or two. This is what happens down there. So you can see the waves crashing over this little bulkhead. If you can see this, you can see that this bulkhead kind of is warped. A lot of it's slanted in because as the fill gets washed out from here, there's really nothing supporting those boards and they just tilt in, which makes a little bit of a hazard if you're trying to walk around on it. Keep this line right here in mind because I'll show you what this is doing. So this is a really high tide. I think it was in like March. You can see it's way up past the benches. So what are some of the options on what we can do? I'll just lay out 6 different things that we could do. One is we could simply go down there and get 20 planks that are about this long and replace the planks that are missing and maybe see if Tom and his crew could try to level the boardwalk. The pros of that is there's no permitting. It's quick and easy. It probably cost a couple $100. There's no engineering involved. And, you know, that might be the way to go. We're in the middle of a global pandemic. At any given time, we might be in shutdown mode again. Is this a great time to invest a ton of money here? Option 2, and this is an idea that actually Tom Sappington proposed, which is to go a little bit bigger and actually put inland screw piles here that support stringers that utilize these pilings here. These pilings are actually not that old. They're in pretty good shape. We're probably going to get 20 to 30 years out of these pilings. So you could potentially put screw pilings in here and build a really nice 8-foot wide walkway that would be raised probably by 1.5 feet. That would at least get pedestrians a much cooler, wider path that would rise them above any potential flooding. And that's something we could do. So Tom and Case were kind of crunching the numbers on what that might cost. And this is all ballpark, pie in the sky. Probably this fix will be in the $25,000 to $30,000 range. That so like the Arts Master Plan and many others have suggested is we kind of go big and put like a 16-foot wide. In this case, I showed as an inland dock. Again, screw piles, long stringers forward. So this end maybe is wider than these sort of access legs that get you out there. And that would be a really awesome public space if we could pull it off. It's obviously going to be more expensive, probably 50 to 75K. Is building an actual dock off the end of the bulkhead. This is something that Jim Gatto was proposing back in the 1940s. I'm exaggerating, but this is a proposal that's been in the comp plan forever, and we've just never done it. Right? It could be a fixed dock. It could be a floating dock, which I think was suggested in our public arts master plan. Some of the downside with that is I think anytime you're putting pilings out in the river, you're going through MDE, and I can just tell you from experience, that's not a nimble process. A very interesting idea. So this whole area here, you saw in those earlier pictures, this bulkhead used to go like this. This is all bulkheading, right? And Bill, I don't remember when this was, but it was maybe the early 2000s.
Yes.
We got a major grant from, I think it was the Chesapeake Bay Trust and Utilized Environmental Concern, a great firm out of Easton. They removed this bulkhead entirely, put riprap out here to protect the shoreline from wave action, dumped a bunch of sand in the back, and then planted native grasses here. So now we have a living shoreline here. Potentially, we could just say, hey, this is sinking. This is only going to get worse over the next few decades. Maybe we can seed this whole area where that fault line is back to the river and engineer it so that this land slopes into the river and kind of following this contour line. Again, this is pretty much exactly that fault line. We put a living shoreline out here. There are a lot of pluses to that. One is it basically eliminates your flooding concerns because it's just flooding a marsh. That's what marshes are there for. Look at this repair as part of a broader, and this is sort of the go big or go home, Chris Cerino dreaming out loud scenario. We have had in our comp plan this concept of a river walk for as long as I can remember. And we actually have really a very unique, almost a once in a lifetime opportunity to make something really spectacular happen where maybe you walk out and this is like an 8-foot or 16-foot wide, deck of some kind. And maybe that extends into a boardwalk that's on the river side of all of this vegetation. But what's great is this entire area, so this is owned by the town, so we know we're good for that. This is all owned by the college, who's indicated they're good for it. And all we need to do is come up with a plan that we all agree with, get it, officially engineered, get a price tag for it, and then go to town trying to find urban open space money or other funds. So ideally, this waterfront walk would extend from Wilmer Park through the college property. In my view, we just go big and go all the way around the edge of this giant Phragmites marsh, somehow reconnect to Quaker Neck Road, and then to my eye, there's plenty of room for a pedestrian walkway. Maybe you put bollards along the road to create a little separation from traffic, and that brings the pedestrian right back to Wilmer Park, where you could then have a connection up here to the rail trail. And that is a pretty spectacular amenity for a town of our size that